We've got softer cushions. We've got softer mattresses. Our cars are quieter. They go faster. We can now travel the world at 700 miles an hour, no problem. You want to go to space, you go to space. All of the comfort and technologies was masking or palliating the real crisis at hand, which was this continuous further and further disconnection from our nature. As humans, we need to lose the egoic belief that in the next couple decades, we could technologically solve what nature created in 4 billion years.
All right, this finally happened. Today, you made it down to the Temple home in Laguna Beach. It's your second time here. Last time you were here, we were wining and dining with my mom, which is really trippy because not a lot of people get to meet my mother, and you left a powerful impression on her. She just can't stop talking. She's like, when are you talking to Zach next? When you two together? Oh my God, it's like this and that. And then I put a little social media out earlier today in my private Telegram rooms, also on Instagram, and everyone's like, oh my God, finally these two are getting in front of a camera and we can hear our conversation. Dr. Zach Bush, thank you so much for making it down to Laguna. Welcome to Wake the Fake Up. I love seeing your face and I love our hugs. How are you, brother?
I'm blessed to be alive today with you. It's always so fun to break bread with like-minded and like-vibrating people, and it's really cool to experience life through the lens of humans because we are a multifaceted consciousness ultimately, and so it's always lovely to get a new look into who I am in the face of a brother. So thank you for being part of this.
I feel that fully, and what's unique about you is, we recently met. I've been in your field energetically for quite some time, but it was not till 7-8 months ago that we met over in Newport Beach in the summer. You were doing a lecture and I came and there was so much tribe there. And I'm an anthroposophist. I've Waldorf education, deeper understanding of Rudolf Steiner, going into biodynamics, and his cosmology is kind of the imprint on my soul, looking outside of that mechanistic materialism or that pure left brain scientism, which has become the new religion, the new dogmatic outside of the other religions. And with you, I feel that frequency coming from you, and you're meeting your spirit with a level of science that explains them both, which is a spiritual science. Mm-hmm. And I resonate with what you have to offer. I resonate because it's coming from a sophisticated research, purposeful endeavor, but it's also coming from the heart. It's connected to the earth. It's not woo-woo, airy-fairy, spiritual mumbo-jumbo, and it's not left-brain, material, draconian science. It's the balance of both ecosystems coming together non-dualistically, and I vibrate with that energetically, emotionally. It's inspiring me. I'm waking up every day. Whenever I hear something that you have to say, it inspires me to go further in my development of formulas and my development of my relationships. Super sensible awareness too, which is a Steiner perspective. We got to have common sense before anything else. We can't let too much intellectualism run us over. And so how did this come to pass? I want just a brief introduction, if you will, on how you came to be at this level that you're operating right now, which is also a really funny, interesting, happy-go-lucky guy. How did this come to pass? And did I kind of hit it on the nail of what I'm feeling from you? Because what I see in you is what I see in me, and it's pure love, man, and admiration.
That's kind of you to say it all. I do resonate with everything you're saying there in the sense that it's very much just like the simplicity of a symphony. You can walk into an orchestra, you hit that tuning fork that happens to be at 440 hertz, and every A string in the entire orchestra starts vibrating. And when you look at human biology, we're simply a column of water that suspends trillions of antenna systems that we call DNA that are biophotonic phenomenon that capture the energy waves of the cosmos, and then as a TV, rabbit ear antennas, if you can remember that far back, goes, you can capture, all of the waves, but if your antenna are right at the right tuning, you'll get a clear ABC channel and you'll get to see your sitcom or whatever it is. Our DNA, specific to ourselves, is that perfectly tuned antenna to be receiving basically a self-identity. And I believe that every single being, be it animal, plant, whatever, has its own frequency of resonance that gives it its own personal fingerprint of identity and its own role within the cosmic expression of beauty on this planet. But there's definitely this phenomenon of chords or harmonics or harmonies. And so that you start playing the right notes next to each other and everything gets much more beautiful than just a bunch of A notes humming together. And so what happens when you and I or any group of people gets together that have been listening to the same music, if you will, witnessing the same beauty, we all get to play the same symphony now, and all of the parts come in. You've got the oboe, and you've got the strings, and you got the bass that comes in at some point, and the timpani that with the rhythm, and just like that sense of belonging occurs when the music really starts to play in all of its different levels and all of its different frequencies. And for too long, humanity was really relegated to this rugged individualism phenomenon where if you were to break out of the common narrative, which was a scarcity, egoic space, you were forced to be there alone. And in that aloneness, psychosis was pretty common. And so you look at Nikola Tesla or you look at Buckminster Fuller, it was always a battle to stay sane in the playing field of one note. And you're trying to hit that note, and you're bonging the bong and gong every day, and it's just falling on deaf ears because the rest of the orchestra hasn't shown up.
You're not getting the response. The resonance isn't hitting, right?
And you're not getting reinforced in your own vibration, right?
Yeah.
So you start to decay in that vibration, and you can drop into different forms of inefficacy as far as your own empowerment goes. And I think this is something happening right now in history. And it can track as short as my short career, a few decades, go from party line, Western medicine doctor, trained in allopathic, pharmaceutical model, designing chemotherapy in 2005-10 era, to suddenly realizing, wow, that system was a partial truth, and really was designed a world that forced me into a pursuit of a whole truth, and started pursuing that at the level of nutrition, starting to understand what is the true intercession or relationship between human biology and this nature that we would call nutrition. And as we started to study that in my personal lab and biotech companies, it became really clear that nothing really actually reaches its full vitality until there is biodiversity. And it's in the diversity that we reach our full potential of intelligence and connectedness to the universe. And so that's really been the science journey in our laboratory, but it's also been my personal journey to watch jumping out, and me and a couple colleagues talking about glyphosate 10 years ago to now you can't walk down and enter a Starbucks without hearing somebody say glyphosate. And so it's like an amazing situation where thought leaders are now coming together for really global solutions to occur, whereas that used to be the one individual going insane over their lone note. So excited to be with you, to be part of your symphony.
I really appreciate that, and I receive that as a refraction or as a solar panel, photobiomodulation, audio files, cymatics. They create geometries through the technologies of energies and systems. And we are, like you said, wow, we are living, breathing, intelligent beings having some kind of experience in these bodies. And we're made up of earth elements, we're made up of stardust, we're capturing the frequencies of our celestial bodies. We're running on an electrical current. Our hearts are synced based on an electrical situation. It's based on a polarity of acid and alkaline. All of these things are so fascinating, and it really helps you motivate and deep dive into what is health? What is homeostasis? What is allopathic versus holistic? What did the Ayurvedic masters know back 2,000-3,000 years ago? What did the TCM masters know? What did the ancient Merlin magic and Druid magic and all those things? And so you were an allopathic doctor that was involved in the therapies of chemotherapy and other different forms of annihilation in the body to destroy cells that are not properly creating cell division and going awry, correct? And all of a sudden you realize that instead of nuking a certain part of the body or adding more poison to the body, we just need to make sure the body's communicating properly. And that starts with understanding the communication centers of the body, the meridian points, the microbiome, all of those things. Was that a big aha moment for you? Was it an individual that inspired you? Was it a book? What happened?
It was a bunch of steps that kind of fell into place to force me on the path, but it began with my chemotherapy development in vitamin A compounds. And so rather than trying to poison the cells, started to study the influence of high doses of nutrients into cancer cells.
You said vitamin A, so like retinol palmitate or
so these are
astaxanthin?
Yeah, so these are really synthetic versions of vitamin A.
Okay.
So you take a vitamin A and then you can stabilize it in different salt forms and things like that aren't necessarily naturally occurring. And this allows that vitamin A to get into places that it typically wouldn't be.
Right.
And so we were using pharmaceutical techniques to get nutrients deeper into cells, basically.
Okay, passing through certain barriers of the body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Passing through barriers and also targeting very deep metabolic layers of metabolism. So if you take any of the vitamin A mineral salts you just mentioned, are all going to be hitting the two receptors that are in the cytoplasm of the human cell. The retinoid receptors are the most abundant in the entire body.
Right.
RAR and RXR, these two kind of mirror images of one another. And these two receptors have to form a dimer, which means vitamin A has to bond to both of them. And then once bound to vitamin A, they come together in almost a heart-shaped matrix. And then that dimer can bond to a DNA engagement site or a gene transcription site and cause thousands and thousands of genes to be transcribed into their protein endpoints. And so it's the most abundant receptor in the body. And so you can imagine that vitamin A traveling in, it's going to get caught up in that human system very quickly. And what we were working on was really specific to getting it to the mitochondria, which are little bacteria that live inside your human cells, at a high enough dose that it could really change metabolism. Humans don't set our own metabolism, which is pretty strange and not talked about often in medical literature, even though it's been well known for a long time. It's the bacteria inside our cells that set the metabolism, which we call mitochondria, but they're just small little bacteria that live and prosper in our cells. And so they have this very holy of holy space where it's the cytoplasm of human cells. It's always the same osmolality, same pH, like no noxious anything inside of a cell. It's like living your entire existence within a womb. It's so protected.
Right.
Until, of course, we started developing chemicals that could be delivered through our food system and water systems to penetrate that boundary. And those were the herbicides and pesticides that really started to enter this space and kill the bacteria inside our cells. And so mitochondria set our metabolism, and they are our greatest vulnerability when we start to poison the environment. And so I was working on feeding those nutrients in high dose to cancer cells. And cancer cells become cancerous because their metabolism drops.
Right.
High energy cell can never get damaged. A cell that has enough information and energy.
It's the loss of communication, right? It's the loss of communication, not getting the right transcription factors and coenzymes and cofactors to tell it what to do and how to reproduce. Then it becomes senile, and then from that point on, it replicates into cancer and becomes abnormality. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, and it's interesting, so you're jumping to this phenomenon where mitochondria, as they digest nutrients, which are really, at the macro level of fuel, it's glucose and fatty acids, long carbon chains.
Right.
And it's breaking down those carbons so that it can release energy. And stored between two carbon bonds is sunlight.
Yep.
So chlorophyll grabs sunlight and stores it in two carbons in the form of two CO2 molecules that get bonded together to store the light energy. So we store sunshine in long carbon chains, and then we release sunshine inside of our cells. And that light energy is really a form of electromagnetic energy. And so light is basically a description of a vector-specific electromagnetic field that's traveling through space. Right. It can be a particle or a wave at the same time. Electromagnetic field that's not in motion is not registered as light, but it instead fills the vacuum space and holds density. And so electromagnetic field can be particleized and go into the waveform of light. But the sun is emitting this massive electromagnetic field, and it's bombarding biology, chlorophyll, specialized bacteria inside of plant cells will grab that, store the sunshine, pass that into soil systems or ultimately into an animal that will consume that. And as that light is liberated, it literally emanates from the mitochondria as light energy, and it can move from cell to cell through fiber optic tubes. And so we have these exquisite systems of fiber optic cables that connect one cell to the next. We call them gap junctions because somebody patented the word fiber optic cables in the macro world before we saw these in human cells. But
right.
So gap junctions is kind of the lame term for complex fiber optic systems within the human body. And these are exquisite.
These are microtubings?
These are tiny tubules. So these there'll be anywhere from a couple dozen to hundreds of these that will connect one cell to all of its adjacent cells.
Yeah.
And these tubes you're looking at, the single cell is about half the width of a human hair for like an epithelial cell of your gut. And the gap junction is about a fifth of that again. So you're 20 times smaller than a human cell, from 20 times thinner than a human hair is a bundle of these fiber optic cables.
Wow.
And so you're a tiny, tiny, tiny cable. And then if you electron microscope across that cross-section of the gap junction, you realize there's 1,000 cables inside of that cable.
Wow. And that's all for transferring carbon?
Light.
Light. Okay. How do we define light in the human body?
It's light that's being released from double carbon bonds. Okay. So it's electromagnetic field or electron flow coming off of the breaking of double carbon bonds.
So the break opens up the sequestered light or the radiation, whatever we want to call it.
Just like lithium chloride in a lithium-ion battery.
Yep.
It has stored a little bit of electricity between the lithium and the chloride. It's a salt. And so a salt is one way to carry electricity, but it's very inefficient because it actually requires energy to store it.
That's right. Yeah.
And so this is why you can leave your cell phone off and it will drain itself relatively quickly, or you can leave a package of batteries that have never been plugged into anything and they will run themselves dry because it takes energy to maintain that energy storage. Double carbon bond, zero energy demand.
Wow.
And that's the most efficient battery that's ever been discovered, and it is the basis of life on the planet.
Well, when you had this aha moment, because I remember I was studying photobiomodulation, we are solar panels. I was hanging with a breatharian out on the island. I mean, people that aren't even eating food, and they're just grounding to the earth, getting the sun rays, ions, all that, like living off that energy. When you had this aha moment, what did that change in you? What did that change in your lifestyle and the way that you approached food and all those things?
Yeah, so I was in endocrinology and metabolism was my specialty. Second specialty, my first I was in internal medicine, which is basically just hospital-based adult care. So I did a lot of ICU and I was just always in the hospitals, a little bit of general practice, medicine for geriatrics and stuff like that in the outpatient setting. Then I went to endocrinology and metabolism as another 3-year subspecialty there, and that's when I started really studying mitochondria, because the second half of the field, endocrinology, is the communication network within the body based on hormones, and then metabolism is the energy source for the body, basically, and that's mitochondria.
Right.
So that was my area of expertise, and then really got into mitochondria with my cancer research.
This is really the root of all health and our Mother Earth.
Absolutely.
Would you agree? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so if you look at something as simple as aging, the universal process of aging of a biologic species, it's going to be how much water is inside the cell and how much carbon cycle is in it based on the mitochondrial density.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
Hydration inside the cell and carbon inside the cell.
Yeah.
And so basically you have a water and a carbon cycle that is inherent to biology. And if you break that cycle, you rapidly decrease your capacity for repair and you end up with disease. This is at the microscopic level. We'll touch later on the macro version of that at the planet level.
Yes.
Same thing. But at the microscopic level, my world started to take a really weird turn in 2012. So I'd already left the university and I was started my own nutrition center for reversing chronic disease through food. So to answer your question, when I started to really think about that double carbon bond more intensely, when I was watching nutrients kill cancer cells and offer a different psychology or philosophy around what is cancer and how do we treat it instead of trying to poison the whole body to try to kill the damaged cells. What if we nutrify the body and then the body heals everything, And so this was a big change. That was 2010. Started a nutrition center, and we were experiencing some pretty phenomenal things. About a third of our patients would go through radical remission of type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, incredible stories around cancer. But a third of ours were just like stuck, nothing was really changing. And then a third were getting worse when we put people on high nutrient density foods and things like this. And so this was an incredible petri dish of experiment of where are we at as a human biology and where is our nutritional status of the planet. And so we started to uncover this deep vulnerability that we have as we can't even handle nutrients anymore.
Just gut permeability and other things?
Broken gut function there, so leaky gut as a broad spectrum of conditions there. You start adding things like kale and Brussels sprouts, which I was giving in pounds per day. And so you start adding all of those alkaloids and unsoluble fibers and all this stuff to a leaky gut. You stimulate their immune system over and over again. So suddenly they're in this immune system overwhelm.
Cytokine storm.
Chronic inflammation gets worse. Everything's going the wrong direction. Yep. And then you add to that the discovery that those alkaloid-containing foods that should be the foundation of human longevity, things like sweet potatoes, and then your cruciferous vegetables like your cauliflower, your broccoli, your
sulforaphane, root vegetables, things of that nature.
These things are so powerful.
Yeah,
these should be the base, and yet now under chemical agriculture, they carry the highest residues of the chemicals that we've added, mainly glyphosate and other herbicides. And so when you find out that not only is the food now not tolerable to an immune system that no longer has the shield of the gut, you're now adding toxin load to it. So those third of our patients that were kind of this permeable, membrane, we were just dumping toxin and undigestible content into their being, and we didn't realize that as a nutrition center we had become their new problem.
When did it hit you in the study? Where you just
we were 2 years in, and it was an interesting journey because the first belief system that I really had to heal in myself, coming out of 17 years in academic medicine, was that patients are stupid and they're always lying.
Yeah.
Somehow this is drilled into our psyche that patients never do the right thing. Even if you go tell them to exercise and eat, they never do, and so they just need the drug, Yeah. And the reason why they don't do the right thing is we don't even know what to tell them to do.
That's right.
We don't know what food they should eat. We don't know what is exercise. We don't even know as doctors. And
everyone's different, right? Someone's therapy could be someone else's poison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't actually. It'd be interesting going into exercise at some point, but we've developed a reductionist belief of everything: food, exercise, breathing, whatever it is. And so the reductionist view was really damaging our capacity as physicians to give constructive information to our patients to go apply something that would actually heal them. And so then we just blame them. And that's what any psyche does when equipped with an inadequate amount of information or resources.
Sure.
It can only fail.
Yeah.
And so it needs to externalize the failure to the other party. And so as physicians and scientists, we are really drilled into us that we are going to fail as a Western medical school because they're idiots.
Yeah.
And
what a vicious cycle.
It's vicious. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy,
That's
right?
100%.
And so
create it.
if we don't teach them something, they won't know.
That's right.
And if they don't know, then they can't
do anything.
Promulgate for themselves, and so they just need more drugs.
Discernment keeps popping up in my head, like the act of discernment.
And in some ways, it's what you tie back to Steiner is, wow, where did the common sense go in all that process?
That's right.
And the answer is it got buried under 17 years of intellectual training and brainwashing that I required to get to the point where I stopped believing in health.
Yep. I think everyone listening to this kind of knows where the problem came from to a certain degree, and that's big on social media, that's big out there, big agriculture, the Dow chemical companies, the medical systems, and things of that nature. Instead of getting into that, let's talk about what, from that point on, was your self-realization. Were you going through any health obstacles yourself? What was the wake-up call, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, the one that's coming to mind, I was about a year into my clinic and was starting to see the failure of nutrition. So I was seeing nutrition become the problem, and I started to trust my patients that they were telling me the truth. And that was a big pivot point. And at this point, I was 7 days a week running my own little rural clinic. I was in BFE world, like a town of 550 people, fifth generation poverty in rural Virginia. Like it was total food desert, no grocery stores, gas stations were a primary source of food. And so in that space, salt of the earth, wonderful people came into my life that I called patients at the time, and they became my best teachers.
Wow.
And those people became incredible friends, colleagues, and teachers to the clinic. And I was able to bring a really diverse team in there ultimately, from Chinese medicine all the way through to Western medicine, and we started learning together from these patients that were applying everything we told them because they really wanted to break themselves out of the codependent relationship to their co-pays for their medications and the trips up to the hospital 2 counties away and everything else. So it was really community, I think, that started to solve for my crisis.
That's
and
beautiful.
My crisis deepened when I was at the university to the point of near suicidal kind of depression because of isolation. Wow. And so to contrast isolation in academia being programmed with a pharmaceutical model of health to grassroots community within a rural impoverished area that started to realize that it could be self-determinant as a community.
Yeah.
And so we started teaching a plant-based diet rooted in real soil. And the experience was just mind-blowing. Wow. We had people planting not gardens for themselves, but their entire churches, and they were suddenly feeding 40 families off half an acre of garden. Like I just saw things I didn't know was possible at that community level. And meanwhile, we started a basic science laboratory because we had discovered in soil a new form of medicine that gets at your previous question about, isn't it all about communication? Health is a state of communication. So I mentioned that it's water and carbon cycles in the body that determine your longevity. A really cool thing happens as carbon molecules, the bacteria in your cells, the mitochondria start digesting those long-chain carbons down to CO2. They start making lots of different shaped carbon molecules on the way through there. Yeah. And those carbon molecules, we now call them carbon snowflakes because each species of bacteria and fungi seem to make a different variant or family of these carbon molecules. And when you put them into a water aqueous state, they create a colloidal circuit board. Mm-hmm. And so now you can pass electrical information through long distances.
I've seen that, yep.
And so that colloidal state of carbon made by the bacteria inside your cells, which are the mitochondria, you suddenly have a circuit board for information to travel, and you now have the fabric for a quantum computer system to occur within every single cell. And so it was the magic of starting to realize that the microbiome is the source of the communication network of the body. The hormones that I had learned are way downstream. Those are kind of macro coordinators,
right? Yeah.
But they are not the micro communication system. Yeah. It's kind of like the part of your hard drive talking to a different part of your hard drive on your computer to access some information. But the whole electrical network that we would call a central processing unit that really creates the speed is down at this ethereal interaction with carbon and water at the biochemical rather than cellular level.
It's almost esoteric in nature, right? Do you feel 100%.
That?
Yeah. Okay.
Because as soon as, biochemistry is one of our most backward systems that we teach. We teach biochemistry as if it's a Newtonian science.
That's right.
This oxygen is connected to 2 hydrogen, that's a water.
Yeah.
Oxygen is never connected to 2 hydrogen, ever. It's always connected to 1 hydrogen. The other one is in this etheric state around it in a quantum relationship, and the oxygen is letting go of each of those hydrogens every millionth of a second. And so there is no H2O, there's always OH, and the nature of that H is ethereal. It's either there or not there, and it's disappearing or reappearing.
I think I heard that from Gerald Pollack. He was getting into 4th phase water and understanding that it's outside of that and not that Newtonian left brain, material way of looking at it.
Yeah.
That's okay. So let's pause right here because this is one of those aha moments in life where someone that has been raised into a certain field and this was your identity for pretty much up until that point, and this is like you just sat in the jungles and went through all kinds of entheogens and you've had all the demons coming out of you. This must have been a very powerful moment in your life. Was it emotional? What were you feeling? Did you feel like God had touched you and that you're going to change the world? I have to ask.
Yeah, so
I've had some of those moments.
My first touches of that state of the divine happened when I was a kid. When I was my first one that I really remember clearly was at 18. Second one when I was about 23. And then big one happened in 2010. So I'd been shown through my depression and everything else, I started just calling out to the universe, God, to say, look, I've lost track of any reason I should be here because I just spent, $200,000 of school debt, and I can't buy myself out of that debt because I'm only being paid $70,000 a year, which just barely covers raising my 2 kids, getting them to college, and my school debt's mounted. I'm going to go through 2 university things for them, and I just couldn't see a way out of the dark tunnel of it. And on top of that, I was so isolated, and I mean, it's pretty intense to see what academia, the level at which you're able to be isolated within an academic system. But my office, quote unquote, was a 1960s building, which was basically a concrete bunker built in the 1960s with lead paint and old fluorescent tube lighting, and literally 1960s Formica beat-up desk, which half the drawers went open. And it was surrounded in my little 10-foot cinder block, cell with all these freezers that held all of the tumors that I was studying. And so I had 10,000 cancer tumors and the energy vibrating in those in these freezers around me in this frozen state, and me sitting in the middle of that every day alone at a laptop, and then walking over to my lab in which I would inhale all these chemicals and create sterility so I never touched nature, and then I'd be back in the cancer space and vibrating with tumors. Like, you really can't overestimate how toxic this is a place to try to thrive.
Bro, that was visceral.
Yeah, it's intense.
I just pictured that as like a cartoon, that whole experience. We might have to make a cartoon of that.
And now you're supposed to have an intelligent thought.
Yeah.
And now you have to, And so
that's a perfect causality or microcosm reality of what it looks like for that type of construct.
Yeah.
That was like picture perfect. Wow, you couldn't have represented it more clear.
And so the reason it's important to understand that environment is because there's a tendency for us to judge doctors or judge scientists of like, well, they must be
in on
mean,
it,
or there's some cabal, or
system.
It's just in a human environment that shuts down our neurologic capacity for creativity.
Yep.
And then the academic system emerges from that.
Right.
So what does it look like when you have tens of thousands of people that have shut down their creative space and are put on pedestals saying you must know everything? Deep insecurity.
Totally.
And that deep insecurity leads to a deep defensiveness of old beliefs that have been programmed into us that is the only thing we have to hold on to.
Right.
And so why does
your
it
life,
take...
right? For your life, because that's their entire reality.
It's your psyche.
It's your psyche, yeah.
Either you go crazy or you hold on to this.
Yeah. I think we've seen that over the last few years of what's happened, with what. You have a lot of...
you have doctors that are doing something that they inherently know can't be the right answer.
Right.
But is the only answer.
That's right.
The more we're offered only one answer, and you must make this thing fit.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that had happened to me to really pivot me, out of academia, was that two big pieces is my pharmaceutical trials with my vitamin A compounds got shut down by the pharmaceutical industry with blocking patents. I had never heard of a blocking patent before, but there's a lot of patents that are put into different industries to make sure that different technologies that threaten the status quo don't occur. Yeah. And so why don't we have innovation in, eternal energy systems and, all these things? Blocking patents are there to protect the interests of the big players in any industry.
That's right.
And in the pharmaceutical realm, it's very disruptive to think that there's a different pattern than chronic treatment. Chronic treatment is how you make billions of dollars. If you took 3 pills and cured something, there's no economy around that.
That's right.
And no economy is a real problem under our current system.
The current system.
Our current system is saying like, okay, the U.S. medical system is $4 trillion in size. Yeah. To put that in perspective, our entire military and homeland security, defense, everything is about $700 billion. Yeah. So you're 5 times bigger treating chronic disease than the entire most expensive military that's ever existed.
That's right.
And so the military-industrial complex has always been our most durable and generative economy in any big empire.
War is good.
War has always been the generator.
Yeah.
There's a new form of war that's a lot more profitable, which is the war on disease.
That's right.
And the more you war on disease, the more you undermine the possibility of health, because it turns out that there is no such thing as disease attacking healthy humans. Disease emerges from a failing human.
That's right.
And so we are palliating a collapsing human system, human biology, which is, of course, to say we're a collapsing global planetary biology with a pharmaceutical industry that is now $17 trillion annually globally. And so with this, something that's wielding that level of economy, there's a high necessity to keep that going, because the U.S. as a military power or whatever it is relying on the taxation of its productivity.
That's right.
We don't build stuff in the U.S. anymore, but we do create a lot of drugs. Yeah. And so it is our pharmaceutical industry that is keeping us afloat as the largest portion of our economy, as a $17 trillion GDP. it's almost a full third of that now by 2025.
So we need a conscious revolution. We need a wake-up call. Something's going to have to break at some point, right? Because we keep going this direction. People keep getting sicker. More people are less trusting of their medical, physician down the street. I mean, that's happening right now. We're having massive die-off right now. Over the last year and a half, it's been insane. There's definitely something going on karmically in this world. What do you think is ultimately going to be the root of some kind of quasi-utopic world? Is it just more education, more children in the earth, more medium-sized farms, relearning and unlearning at the same time?
In a nutshell, I think it's something called natural law. So I just launched a new nonprofit with some great colleagues over the last year called the Institute of Natural Law, and we are working on re-educating and bringing awareness to the system that has existed since really the origin of human society. But natural law is a very simple methodology that the U.S. Declaration of Independence was based on. All of this, it's not a new science, but it's been really lost in recent decades and potentially centuries. But recommitting ourselves to natural law and its application to all industry, all human behaviors, all human ingenuity and industry will fundamentally change our relationship to nature. Natural law recognizes that every life form, whether a bacteria or a human, is sovereign. It has a distinct reason for being there, and it cannot be owned or destroyed without a system of collaboration governing that.
So rights.
Deeper than rights. Rights are a palliation of broken value systems.
Okay.
And this is one of my concerns around the conservation movement at large, is that we had to default to the rights of nature. And so you see something like Ecuador starting to write in the rights of nature into its constitution in 2007, which was considered a radical jump forward. And yet we've seen more rainforest destroyed since then and everything else. And so it really didn't work. And so why does rights of nature not work? It's because it's trying to palliate or give rights to something that is inherently threatened because there's a mismatch in value systems.
I see, yeah.
Nature has only one value system that I've discovered and I think would be agreed upon, which is biodiversity. Yeah. It has been working towards increasing diversity on this planet since the second there was a DNA strand here. Yeah. And so 4 billion years ago, we see the first slime molds and the first forms of life, and they had tiny little genomes, 13 genes. And those genes started to misspell themselves through enzyme mechanisms of poor proofreading. And so suddenly there's diversity of genes starting to emerge from a relatively rough draft of what life could look like.
They're reacting to things, getting different messages.
Injury happens.
Elements, something.
An acidic pool turns more acidic, or a volcano goes off and temperature shifts, or the osmolality of the ocean shifts, or whatever it is. And so there's stress put on these organisms and they misspell their genes. And in so doing, there was new adaptation to create resiliency, and new adaptation led to biodiversity. And so we go from slime molds to bacteria, and over 1 billion years, we start to see this real acceleration of the sharing of genetics. Initially, it was just through something called horizontal gene transfer. This is where one bacteria has to bump into another bacteria, and then they can envelope information back and forth together. And this happens to this day. In the ICU, for example, when you get a drug-resistant bacteria, it's because there was horizontal gene transfer within the individual, or ultimately within the hospital setting.
Yeah.
And so bacteria exposed to lots and lots of antibiotics, it starts to misspell in its movement towards death. It starts misspelling its genome, and suddenly, there's a gene that actually eliminates that toxin. And so now that bacteria survives. And a beautiful, beautiful thing about nature is as soon as there's a gain of function, the immediate methodologies share that thing.
Yeah.
And so immediately shares
learns.
that opportunity.
It learns
says,
right there.
Everybody, look at this.
Yeah.
We're going to survive. It's okay.
Yeah.
Check this new gene out.
Yeah.
And start sharing with everybody in its environment. Huge innovation.
What does that tell you about our reality, about our world? I mean, that in itself.
At the cellular level and below that, at the atomic level, built into the fabric of nature, is the drive for beauty.
Yeah.
Which is to say life.
Beyond survival.
It's
for beauty.
In fact, screw survival, go for more.
Yeah, for more.
Let's
thrive.
I'd rather share out my whole genome and die under the stress of an acidic pool of water and pass on new information that would make sure that life goes beyond me.
Maybe Darwin was right to a certain degree, not on his cosmology or because I believe in a creator, but it is survival of the fittest.
I would say it's the opposite.
Really?
In fact, I think survival of the fittest.
Explain what you mean by that, because what I'm feeling here is that systems and bacteria and all these things are wanting to learn from each other. They're wanting. So maybe it's not survival of the fittest. Okay, wait, hold on. I'm rewinding that.
Yeah,
it's not let me succeed over here while you fail. In fact, my survival is based on your survival.
Boom.
Okay, there it is. Okay, yeah. I was right there. Okay,
that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And there's an African word for that.
What's that? Ubuntu. Yeah, I knew that. Yes. All right, now we're shaking. Okay, let's get it moving, dude. Okay.
So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That the first time, as soon as you develop a new capacity for life, you share it everywhere because you want more community.
Source code, open source code.
Open the source code immediately, and there is no ownership over anything. There's only a sharing economy of abundance.
Mother of God, can you imagine if the humanity got that?
We're so
at
close.
The prism. We're so close.
We're so close.
We are there.
We really are.
Yeah, we are.
It's happening.
Yeah, it is happening.
It really is. And so we're in the last throes of the belief that we are against everything.
That we are separate of everything. Yeah, that nature's against us, that man is against us, that everything is war and everything is
And if we're separate, then there's scarcity.
Okay.
And you can see this happen on North American continent. Colonialism comes sailing across the ocean, and Jamestown gets set up in 1607. My family arrives in 1617, 10 years later. And so my family's been here for 400 years. And the first things we did when we set up Jamestown was start putting up giant picket fortress fences.
Yeah.
North America had been thriving with 620 nations for 40,000 years without a fence. Without a fence.
Yeah.
620 nations collaborating together through natural law. That was the most advanced form of governance that the world had seen.
Yeah.
The Iroquois had really mastered this wisdom, and there was a council of women that crossed many, many nations in their sourcing, and the council of women would resolve conflict between nations through deep meditation and fellowship to one another, and they would come up with basically statesmanship decisions to resolve conflict. If conflict wasn't accepted or the resolution wasn't accepted, then there would be a skirmish. But these battles were done in reverence to one another still. It was really a sacred practice of war.
Yeah.
In that I am here, I am going to go face to face with you, and it is as honorable for me to die as to win.
The beauty of battle.
It was a different matrix in divine law that came in from colonialism. Divine law said, my God's smarter than your God. You're not, you don't have a king that this is passing through the wisdom. And so the whole, royalty of London truly gave us this belief of manifest destiny and all these things, the discovery doctrine. If we find a new land, then it's ours, this ownership creep. And so we had natural law running for 40,000 years, 600 nations, and then we come in with divine law through this royalty thing, and it justified destruction of everything. And so it was the belief that we are waiting for some external God to work through us with wisdom and save us or provide for us, rather than realizing that nature is an expression of the divine. Nature is an expression of the universe that would be abundant to everything that would end up there. And so we scarcified nature by the belief that we were against it. And therefore we needed a God that would save us from the battle with nature. And in so doing, we needed to believe that our God was better than all other gods, And so it was this creep of this scarcity model ultimately into all sectors: psychology, spirituality, philosophy. All of it encroached with this scarcity model, led to this divisiveness and judgmental, characterization or reductionist view of the human being against all things.
This is New Age philosophy that creeped in around the 1600s. That's when science started to take off, and you had more of the ego coming in, the individual, where like the Eastern mystics were, we're all part of this. We're connected in every single force. There's no separation between man and earth and things of that nature. And then what you're talking about is, the vision of paradise is, we're ascending somewhere else. this is not paradise, it's somewhere else. So that gets lost into a trap and then becomes a spell or a virus, so to speak, some kind of parasitic energy. It is a parasitic energy, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, the belief of separatism or the belief of separation absolutely turns you into a parasite immediately.
Right.
Because now you believe there's not enough for you and you need to suck life from everything around you.
That's right.
And that's what a cancer cell does. And so a cancer cell gets divided.
It robs everyone else.
Yeah, and the beginning of cancer is isolation. So you isolate a single human cell, it immediately turns into a precancerous cell that's fast on its way to becoming malignant. And so isolation leads to malignant behavior, which is parasitic, taking resources from around itself because it can no longer provide for itself because it's lost its connection to source. Wow. So you lose connection to source, your metabolism immediately drops. If you cut all those fiber optic cables to all the other cells, now you're dim. You go and build Jamestown and build this fortress-like wall around it and say, this is ours. Well, you just ruled out 99.99% of all the resources of North America with that fence. Yeah. It's the stupidest model. And yet today, it's just over in Africa, and you see it in spades. You drive out of Cape Town, and you're in these multi-million-dollar houses in the most beautiful coastline of the world, and you're driving up that eastern seaboard of Africa, and it's just the most astonishing power of ocean with astonishing cliffs, and the flora and fauna is like next level. It makes Alaska look like it thought small, it's just such a dream, and you've got these $1 million mansions all stacked up into these coves and epic scenes, and around every single $1 million mansion is a 10 to 15 foot wire fence to keep the world out, and you realize, my God, there's $1 billion worth of prison cells that were built by the very people living in them. And so in our belief of ownership, we end up in prison cells, whether it be Jamestown or your $1 million mansion, in off the coast. And you go around the bend, and then there's suddenly an unofficial settlement, which is what they call the squatter villages there, the unofficial settlement that sprawls with the same gorgeous view, the same stunning cliffs, and there are kids everywhere running around with plastic ball bags taped together into soccer balls. There's pigs roaming around, there's chickens, sprawling shanties with hardly a wall between each other. There's 4 generations of families living together. There's elders. There's the whole thing, and this is poverty.
Wow. And that's poverty.
And there's wealth.
Yeah.
Wealth only occurs when you have completely isolated yourself from the world.
Yeah.
Poverty happens if you're interconnected and believe in beauty. And so we have so misaligned our value systems that we've had to create rights. Yeah. And so when giant economies that are parasitic and extractive because of their belief of scarcity, because they believe they are separate, starts killing and wiping out all things, every soil, water, air system now owned by the Chinese or Americans or now multi-billion-dollar companies like Nestle and our big food industries owning more than most fiat countries do, all of those fences, all of that ownership, all of that extraction has driven us to wiping out 97% of indigenous cultures and peoples over the last 200 years and destroying 97% of the soil systems of the planet at the same time. And so this extractive nature has reached its pinnacle state. And now we see biology collapsing on the planet for the loss of biodiversity. And so
loss of communication.
Loss of communication is secondary to the loss of biodiversity.
Yeah.
So you lose biodiversity, you lose that whole colloidal matrix of communication that we mentioned. And now you start to lose network communication, you get isolation, all the cells start acting malignant.
It's seated in the conscious of men and women right now. This is something that we're like at generation loss. We've forgotten what we've forgotten. It's gotten to that point.
For sure.
This reminds me of what Steiner's intention was with biodynamics. It wasn't to make the most mineralized food, the healthiest food. That was a side effect of giving authority back to the human. It's becoming the steward of the land and having a connection to the soil and having connection to other people. That's the Waldorf method. We're incubating children. We're not indoctrinating them. We're allowing them to build their faculties of intuition and love and experience, deal with their own conflicts. So we are connected and not isolated. At the root of that is that form or that seed of intelligence that is inherently within us. How do we get this back out there? How do we wake this up? Because we're running towards I know you said that it's happening, but we're also heading towards a cliff with no brakes on it. That's industries are falling right now. Maybe they're supposed to fall, But there's wars happening all over this world, which is a total breakdown of consciousness. We have scarcity at the highest level, poverty conscious, emotional problems. Everyone's in this debt slave capitalistic system. Nobody even wants to really talk about these things. And most people that think they can't even have these conversations because they're worried about paying the rent. And they're, how do I just shut my child up and put an iPad in their face and have them go into another form of escapism? We're in that level. And so these conversations are here to spark and to create ideas, and then actually some action, feet on the ground, hands in the earth, hands colliding, big hugs, big love, all these kinds of things. What is the next step? What are you doing right now with all this? And we can rabbit hole into all the health stuff. I think that's on the next podcast. I want to get into like deep levels of awareness of how we're activating our body.
There we go.
But what are we doing?
Yeah. First of all, thank goodness it's such a disaster, because humanity in our current state of consciousness or awareness of how we fit into the universe only change direction when there's crisis. We do not change when things are good. Yeah. Never dawns on us that anything needs to change. Yeah. And that's how we really got to this boiling point, is for so long things felt good because our innovations were actually creating comfort. Yeah. And so, yes, mismatched values, but we couldn't feel that because we felt more comfortable with every decade that went by. Oh, we got houses that are always 72 degrees. We've got softer cushions. We've got softer mattresses. Our cars are quieter. They go faster. We can now travel the world at 700 miles an hour, no problem. You want to go to space, you go to space. Like, all of the comfort and technologies was masking or palliating the real crisis at hand, which was this continuous further and further disconnection from our nature. Yep. And so now we see the collapse of all things because in our isolation we created that parasitic, sucking sound on the planet, and now we see this really rapid decline. And I do want to emphasize that it's just so simple in the end, because it is terrifying from an existential standpoint to say that science can now predict our own extinction within the next 60 to 80 years. In the agricultural world, we can predict the last harvest on Earth, which is about 55 years out.
We're heading that way. Like that's an accurate statement.
It's an accurate scientific thing. Like this rate of topsoil loss globally that we experience every single year, there will not be another harvest of food on the planet in 55 years.
Hydroponics won't catch up to that. We cannot sustain health in that process.
And there's an important message is, as humans, we need to lose the egoic belief that in the next couple decades we could technologically solve what nature created in 4 billion years.
Did you hear that? That's it right there. Technology is not our savior. It's actually the Trojan horse, in my opinion.
And I would say that's technology that is matched to this old vibration of scarcity.
Correct.
Parasitic. The new technologies that we're going to witness are actually human cells, are actually plant cells. And so we're going to start doing biomimicry, realizing that the highest technology on the planet is us. Yeah. And we need to start treating each other with enough respect, realizing that you are the greatest technology invented. I'm going to hug you differently, being like, wow, this is a quantum computer 70 trillion times over. There's 70 trillion quantum computers that are interlaced through fiber optic network, creating a conscious beam of light here that is emanating information from the cosmos into our current space. And so when I come and hug this thing, I'm going to be open to the receipt of information. And if I start to hug people that way, the intellect that could come out of that has never been witnessed before, because we didn't see each other as the highest technology on the planet. We kept believing that some engineer was going to solve and build us a better car or run on electricity instead of gas, and that would be our solution. An electric car is such a dumbed-down version, Newtonian belief system of even what batteries are, like lithium-ion battery. Terrible idea. At any rate, nonetheless, to think that Tesla sitting there is anywhere near as exquisite of design as a child who has just come out of the womb of a woman, and now, within moments, starts integrating information through trillions of neural connections to see patterns. And this is where I believe we find our reason for being. Why did nature create this technology called human? Before I answer that why, I would love to geek out for a minute on how. How the hell did this technology get created? Because it's the opposite of survival of the fittest, as we recognized earlier. It's a shared economy of discovery. Nature is curious about what could come next. And so she designed a fabric of biology in the form of genes and proteins that would always be iterating to some future possibility.
Sure.
If some cataclysmic event happens, it only makes things better because it puts all of the biology under stress simultaneously, and they all misspell all of their genes at the same and put out all kinds of new opportunity.
Yeah.
So after every extinction event, 5 big ones on Earth before humans showed up, last one famous for the dinosaurs and all that, these extinction events lead to explosions of biodiversity on the planet.
Sure.
And so we had struggled up to reptiles ruling the world in the form of dinosaurs. Palms and ferns had taken over the whole world. And so we had this incredible green planet with huge reptiles, many of which were herbivores living on the most nutrient-dense soils and plants that the planet has to this day ever made. We haven't struggled back to the same soil density that we had 55 million years ago. So dinosaurs like an Allosaurus, Brontosaurus, these have a head the size of a horse and just ate plants. Stomach was acidified like the reptiles, and so it wasn't like an herbivore that was like continuously nutrient extracting. And so it had the nutrient reservoir basically of a horse that it could, and yet it could hold a body 4 times bigger than an elephant because the damn nutrients were so intense in those plants that it was eating. Because the soils that those were growing in had reached this abundant state that we've never seen since.
That was always my doubt on dinosaurs. I didn't understand anatomically how the weight would hold. I was always a little bit skeptic on that, but keep going.
Yeah, and so that
the light energy,
the amount of light energy in the
so full on that's almost magnetized to be able to almost levitate, for God's sakes.
I mean, you can build biology as big as you want if there's enough light.
Sure.
If there's enough energy, there's no limit.
Infinite potential, yeah. Okay.
And so we lost that nutrient density in food, and the whole planet went extinct. So there's some layer of dust that settled on the whole planet. It may have been an asteroid, may have been a volcanic event, may have been a nuclear event, depending on who you talk to. But whatever devastated the soils of the Earth, we suddenly lost the respiratory cycle of the planet, which is to say carbon. You break the carbon cycle in a single cell, it becomes cancer. Break the carbon cycle on the global scale, you get extinction.
Yep.
So we lose 92% of life on all of Earth. And in those few months or years in that great extinction event, every cell of every biology on the planet starts putting out new opportunity. And we go from dinosaurs to birds, mammals. The intelligence explodes as much as the beauty explodes. We went from ferns and
infinite
palms
diversity
to wildflowers, deciduous trees that had never existed before.
Yeah.
But for the stress of extinction, creating the new possibility.
Interesting.
Nature is inherently creative and curious and always looking for the next opportunity to express more biodiversity and more beauty. And so along come humans just 200,000 years ago, just like a little moment in time compared to geologic history of this march. So this brief moment, mammals suddenly go to humans. How did that happen? Like, what's the difference between a monkey and a human? For that matter, what's the difference between a pig and a human? And Watson and Crick were sure it was in the DNA, and we all became sure it was in the DNA, such that when I was going into medicine in the early 1990s, I said I would be the first generation of physicians that practiced personalized medicine, which would be an experience where I could swab the cheek of a patient as they walked into my exam room and at 18 years of age, and I could tell them exactly what diseases they would get over their lifetime and exactly which medications would work to treat those diseases specific to their genome.
Yeah.
And we thought, wow, we're going to discover 400,000 amazing genes because we knew we had 400,000 different proteins in a body, and we knew one gene made one protein, Watson and Crick. And then we decoded the genome at 20,000 genes. Really bad news because a flea had 30,000 genes. So to find ourselves 2/3 as complicated as a flea at the genetic level, we suddenly realized this is not the secret of intelligence. This is not the secret of connectivity of intellect or
the
consciousness.
message isn't there. The answer is
not in the genes.
Yeah.
We sit between a fruit fly and a flea genetically. Further than that, you can take the human genome, clip it into 178 puzzle pieces, and then rearrange that into a new puzzle called pig.
Yeah.
Exactly the same genes.
Right.
Pig, human. And so what makes us so damn interesting and ultimately creative as a species? And I think it's 2 things. I think the first is the capacity to hold ecosystem diversity within a single organism. And so the most...
Our internal diversity trumps anything out there?
Anything.
Interesting.
The colon specifically.
Right.
So the human colon is now recognized to hold more biodiversity, more species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, etc., than any other ecosystem on the planet. Whoa. More than a coral reef, more than the jungle, cubic centimeter by cubic centimeter. This is the biggest density of biodiversity that the planet has ever invented.
More than a swamp in the Amazon.
More than any other we've found. And the result turns out to be, the mechanism of the result is that our neurologic system developed the ability to listen to that biodiversity.
Right.
And so we have billions of afferent nerves that we now realize just in the last couple of years actually poke through the intestinal membrane to communicate directly with the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and the rest. Right. And so to find out that our brain is listening to all the data streams from thousands and thousands of species, and then our central processing unit is making pattern recognition based on all of the information coming through all of nature, we are the CPU chip of this planet. Oof. We are the central processing unit to be witness to the beauty of nature. And we do that through having the most exquisite keyboard that nature has developed. Your keyboard of your computer is what ultimately puts the information into the CPU chip to create a term paper.
Correct.
Or to write a poem. The chip has never written a paper. No matter how many iterations that Intel processor can do, it can't have a thought.
Has to have a root source.
All the information is coming out of something else.
That's right.
And so that's your keyboard inputting that. But the keyboard will sit there on your desk all day long and drive you crazy because you haven't been able to figure out the first chapter of your book yet, because it's not actually the keyboard that writes the damn paper. It's the fingers on the keyboard. And what we find out in this beautiful dance of biology is that the keyboard is the neurologic system listening to the ecosystem, and the fingers are bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. So nature is writing on the keyboard of the human sensory processing unit. And for that, we get to see more patterns of beauty and make more incredible discoveries and creative thought than any other species ever has, because we are the representation of the most diversity that any species has ever held. So that's how we became intelligent, perhaps, at the cellular and energetic level. Why? And this is very interesting to me, but I think it has some bizarre thing to do with our five senses. Why are we getting all of this information? Why are we able to create so much?
Decode it and receive it and interpret it. How?
Build a skyline like New York City. Like, how, why and how?
Right.
Like, why are we doing that? Why are we so creative? Why are we so ingenious and so innovative and so industrious to do these things? And I think it has to do with our five senses. Our five senses are the reason, I believe, that we developed the first separation disorder. Our five senses are uniquely designed to give us the impression that we are separate from nature. The depth that we see with our field of vision, for example, is very unique to mammal biology. The mammals under the water, the mammals out in the jungles, they see depth much differently. And so the Umfeld, which is a cool word that basically describes your perceived reality, is very specific to the human eye and the human ears and the human nose and the human tongue. And so these five senses were uniquely designed to give us the impression of separateness. Oh, this tastes different than this, so this is definitely a lemon and this is definitely an apple. They must not be the same thing.
To be able to individualize.
To give us the sense of distance, all of these things, to give us the sense of we are over here, everything else is over there.
Okay.
And so it's that sense of separateness that then ultimately requires us to develop an ego. Because my God, if I'm separate from everything, I need some fences here.
Sure.
I need to protect myself.
It. Yeah.
And so we put up the ego, and suddenly we just have eliminated 99.999% of all the resources of the universe.
Which is everyone else.
Just like putting up that fence at Jamestown.
Wow.
We just eliminated nature. And so we do become scarce immediately with an egoic mind. And that egoic shield has to become more and more dense to block any possibilities that we're wrong or that we aren't the strongest. And maybe it is survival of the fittest and all this stuff. So we got to be stronger. We got to be tougher. We got to be meaner. We got to kill everything before we get killed.
Yeah.
But why would we be given five senses? So obviously we kind of perverted the five sense experience with an egoic fear of separateness. And we have a lot of mythology and religious beliefs around that, the garden and eating from the forbidden fruit, which was the tree of knowledge. So you suddenly get this sense of like, oh my gosh, we're separate from nature. Now we got ashamed of ourselves and we cover up.
We took it, yeah.
We somehow suddenly saw ourselves separate from everything. And so in that separation, we developed fear, guilt, shame, and we developed the ego there. The alternative would have been to maintain our understanding that all things were connected despite our five senses. And this is where we're at right now in this end of an epoch, is can we wake up to the reality as humanity, as we have been given a special role within nature, not only to be the most incredibly connected CPU chip to see the most beauty and have the most ingenuity, but also ultimately to be witness through the five senses to nature itself. And if we realize that these were given to us not to believe in separateness, but so that we could stand far enough away from nature to see her beauty, that's what makes us unique as a species. You have never seen, and I've sat in Africa many, many sunsets, I have never seen a train of monkeys turn around to watch the sunset.
Ever.
Ever. I have never seen a bird flying in that sunset stop to watch the sunset, to look for the green flash.
Right.
What the heck? We're the only species sitting there, and we will travel to the coast so that we can watch that sun dip in there. I loved Encinitas from when I lived there in Southern California. I loved that couple of years because every evening everybody come flowing out of their houses to line up on Beacon's Cliff to look out at that ocean and watch that orange globe drop into that ocean body.
Flash.
And we all were just in community, and people bring out wine, and it was a party to watch the sunset.
Recognizing we're having a unique individual experience that everyone else is experiencing at the same time.
That, but also not realizing we're the only species doing that.
Right.
Why are we the only species doing that?
Right.
Because we're the only one with five senses that gave us the ability to see the beauty. And so this is a really interesting thing, is I can't actually see your beauty until I understand myself to have a distance from you. When I'm up in a hug from you, I can feel the beauty, but I can't see the beauty because you're behind me. And so it's this ability to step away from nature far enough to be able to see her beauty for which we were designed.
Wow.
I really believe we are here to witness nature. And in our witnessing of nature, become co-creative with her, not against her.
Not against her.
She's not against. She is our bride. She is the bride. We are the bride. And we are told so through religious texts dating back tens of thousands of years. We are the bride of God. We are the bride of nature. What does that mean? It means we can be witness to the beauty of the other.
Right.
And so this is why we are here, is to rediscover our senses as our own superpower. Within all of the complexity and beauty of nature, we have the superpower of seeing the beauty. And when we realize that, we can relax because the parasympathetic system, when seeing beauty, does relax.
That's right.
And we come to see that these five senses were misinterpreted as a signal of separateness and are only there to give us the capacity for the witness of beauty. And so we will be welcomed back into our rightful relationship with nature. Our right relationship with nature is to be witness to the beauty. And in that, become curious of what could we design within her. What is she trying to express through us? And you guys are doing this. You're thinking, with the wealth that we've accumulated through the ingenuity that's come through the microbiome that's typed on your gut long enough to tell you a path towards human health. Yeah. And your life is a very good example of your question earlier was something like, well, where are we going to go? How are we going to get ourselves out of this situation? Yeah. We are getting ourselves out of this situation because some private equity fund manager became one of the most successful nutrient delivery sources for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the heck did that happen? How did that happen? Why did that happen? Because you tapped into a consciousness that had nothing to do with your academic or professional training.
That's right.
You had a knowingness in you about the fabric of nature in regards to its nutrients, and you reconnected humans to nutrients.
That's right.
And by doing that, you tapped into a lot of energy that came in the form of wealth, and the wealth you're now realizing is there as a superpower for you to become a connector of community, not just nutrition.
It's just a current. It's currency. It's energy.
It's energy that you're going to repurpose to a greater connectivity.
That's right.
And you're realizing the wealth of the future is community.
That's right.
And so how do I create space or witness the space that would allow this to come? And so for all of us in this generation, we have to repivot a $17 trillion GDP in the United States alone. Yeah. $40 trillion GDP globally needs to pivot in the next 8 years so that we can rewrite our narrative into the future that has absolutely nothing to do with extinction but recreation. Right. We need to recreate humanity. We need a new humanity to emerge from the genomic intelligence that we've already laid out there. The big innovation that really led to the biodiversity explosion on the planet was viruses. We started with horizontal gene transfer that I talked about.
Yeah.
But 3 billion years ago, we got the ability to send genes distances. We can now call those exosomes. The general public knows those as viruses, but exosomes are the ability to send packets of genetic information out. These are not microbiome. These are not living things, which is a big misperception right now in the public review as well as in physicians right now.
Sure.
But these aren't things that need to be killed. These are literally just the genetics of possibility for the future.
Yeah.
And we call them viruses and we demonize them and we fear them. But really what's happening is genetic sequences of possibility are being distributed. The most regulated decision any cell will make is whether or not they will take a new gene into a protein. 200 different events have to happen on the surface of that gene before it's transcribed into a protein. So this whole model that we're told about viruses come in and they attack human cells and they take over your genetic machinery and they replicate themselves until your cell blows up, it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing in a virus that can take over a cell. A cell is a series of checks and balances to make absolutely sure that cannot be done. Because if it did allow that, or nature did allow that to occur, we would have never occurred.
Yeah,
in my bloodstream right now, I have 10 to the 15 different viruses, which is to say somewhere around 10 to 100 billion different viruses coursing through my bloodstream right now.
Yeah.
If those could take over my cells, I would stop being human instantly.
That's right.
There is no taking over of human cells. The most regulated decision is who am I and who am I going to become?
That's right.
And so if we take up a virus from the environment and we start to transcribe that into new proteins, it's because we see an opportunity for a gain of function. Mm-hmm. So why do people get sick and die after exposure to new genetic information? It's because of a lack of information and a lack of energy, just where we began. New genetics is a true metamorphosis of the creature.
Right.
A metamorphosis of biology takes a lot of energy.
So they can't take on the load.
To take a caterpillar to a butterfly is a massive energetic load.
Absolutely.
And if your energy can't meet that threshold effect, you become sick and you start to decline rather than get stronger. How come in a single household, 5 of the people run around, expose the same air, and don't get sick, and then that one individual gets sick, and maybe 2 people in the household get sick, but it's not like the whole family gets sick and dies of COVID or any virus. It wasn't until we put people in artificial spaces with this virus that we saw high mortality. We put them in an ICU, we could reach 88% mortality, which is 3 times worse than Ebola. And so we did something in the hospital setting 3 times worse than the worst viruses ever discovered.
That's right.
And what we did was give them an unnatural space to breathe, nutrify, etc. So
feel,
we took
love.
And this upgrade that was coming in this virus was so demanding on biology that it was going to demand a huge upload effort, and too many people didn't have the energetic reserve. So we did see people dying following exposure to this genetic information.
So it's not comorbidity, it's mitochondrial dysfunction.
It's mitochondrial dysfunction.
Lack of energy, lack of cellular energy, lack of vitality, lack of electricity in the body.
What do we call that? What do we call lack of electricity, mitochondrial metabolism, all that? We call that obesity, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, and these are the people that were dying.
Autoimmune, metabolic diseases, all of it.
Those were the people that were passing away, not from a virus, but from a lack of energy.
Yeah.
For adaptation. So you lose the ability to adapt.
Right.
Nature eliminates you by a series of checks and balances, because if you can't adapt, you're not part of the story of nature.
That's it.
Which is constantly changing, constantly transforming, constantly iterating for more intelligence and more beauty, more biodiversity. If you can't adapt, you're not part of the biodiversification. Biodiversity is there to encourage and accelerate adaptation. And so when we don't have enough energy to participate in life, we check out.
I mean, this is it. This is the root of health. And this awareness, I'm sure, is shaking the tree of so many people and actually having them realize what self-love is all about. Because at the end of the day, all the things grounding to the earth, drinking clean spring water, eating a healthy, diverse foods, not eating processed foods, not escaping, not drinking too much alcohol, not hitting their body with all kinds of carcinogenic substances, that's a lack of self-love, right? And rooted in this intelligent conversation that is altruistic in ways, but so real and so tangible, all I feel is love. At the end of the day, I'm just feeling love. I'm feeling love for thy neighbor. I'm feeling love for myself. I'm feeling love for the system that I'm part of. I'm now all of a sudden saturated with everyone and everything and all the microorganisms that make me who I am. But I'm not separate from you, Zach. We're connected oscillating in this frequency. This is a monumental moment for so many people out there to realize and discover. What's the next step? What's the next step?
We're not separate, but we can see each other. So that's that unique thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are one.
Yeah.
But at a distance that we can see the unique beauty of one another.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. That's our gift.
Yeah.
That's what gift we give back to the nature of one another. And so it feels good. You're feeling love because I'm vibrating with the sense of beauty of your whole life and what you've put together here, and witnessing the nature that's out around your home here and soaking that up for an hour before jumping in here. And what we're really experiencing together is this vibration of synergy, where one vibration sets another vibration in motion at a higher, reinforces it, and adaptation and innovation starts happening. And so I'm very confident that if we spent 3 weeks on a sailboat somewhere just witnessing nature, we would create an extraordinary new idea for technology, a company, or anything else, because nature would be speaking through two different lenses that are vibrating in the same chord, and we would just be an explosive source of creativity.
Absolutely.
And if we start putting children, as Steiner witnessed, in a space where they could witness nature and come to understand themselves within that nature, and do that in a collaborative space where they were given tools that they could play with, suddenly the creativity kicks in, and those kids would create the world that we all know is possible in our hearts.
That's right.
And so you and I need to become childlike in our hearts again. You and I need to shirk the responsibility and duty that the world has trained us into, become childlike, wondrous beings that just can't wait to see what comes out of our idea universe next. And so we plug into that and we become creative again, and then we create spaces in which our children can show us the real path that's unperturbed by all of the old belief systems and the archaic fears of separation and scarcity and all these things. And so it's really going to be letting the human neurologic system experience the intelligence of nature within it, within a space where the fight or flight zone is completely shut off in the brain, so that the parasympathetic can really live its moment of creativity. Yeah. And we will see it expressed in many, many different ways around the planet, because each human is place informed. We are the result of the local ecology. Yeah. And so this is where culture comes from. We create different art, we create different song, we create different rhythms on a drum. Every culture has a drum. Not one of them plays the same rhythm.
Right.
Fascinating. We hear the rhythms of the earth based on the human genomics in interaction with its local ecology, geology, forces of nature.
We live the lives of everything that's around us. That makes us who we are.
Yeah.
Right?
So how did we disconnect so fast from this system? And this takes us into your next question, which was, well, where do we go from here?
Right.
But to understand, how did we see such a rapid collapse of our understanding of connectedness? Because you talk to any indigenous culture that's still thriving on the planet, there's a lot of indigenous cultures still remembering their old stories.
Yeah.
And they all knew we were interconnected. They all knew that each of us was a sovereign being that represented a different face of the divine or nature itself. They all are universally understanding everything we've talked about. Not a single thing here would be, this is like 101 of sitting around the fire with any indigenous culture.
Absolutely.
You'll know all of this in one night.
This is their firsthand, absolutely.
At age 5.
Yeah.
This is not a master course that you and I are doing. We're basically going back to age 5 at the fire with our indigenous knowledge.
I mean, every indigenous culture that I've been around, including my own, the ancient Persian families, and still practicing Zoroastrianism and the mystics down in Peru, this is how I felt there. The same vibratory field I'm feeling right now is the ultimate intelligence of truth. There's no having to circumvent it or create scarcity from it.
Yes. So how do we cut ourselves off so fast and accelerate the extractive, destructive nature? And I think it's that we actually not only disrupted human biology. We can do a deep dive, another podcast on glyphosate, most ubiquitous herbicide on the world. But a quick one on that is it destroys the tight junctions between human cells and creates leaky gut.
That's right.
So you basically destroy the boundary between outside and inside.
Yep.
And now you can't figure out. Your immune system's totally confused about who you are, and so you get autoimmune disease, and you're killing yourself as much as the outside, and it's just this destructive milieu.
Yeah, your body doesn't know friend from foe.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we started drinking, eating, and breathing and raining on us a molecule that's water-soluble that destroys self-identity at the cellular level. So that happened on the human biology side. But at the planetary side, we started extracting other critical minerals to the information stream around the planet. We talked about some of these earlier. Lithium.
Yeah.
You start mining all the lithium out of the strands of lithium that are running around this planet as if it was wired to carry electricity. Strands of gold and copper have been extracted at a faster and faster rate. Cobalt mines in Africa have disrupted the electrical potential. Why do we use cobalt in cell phones?
Yeah.
Because it's a potent organizer of electromagnetic fields, and so you can create an enormous amount of consolidated information streams around cobalt. Why was that in Earth at that exact point? Was because it was a critical acupuncture point within a meridian system that allowed electricity flow at the global level, that allowed Earth to become a womb that would birth all of life. And bizarrely, the vaginal canal, or the uterus, if you will, or the womb of this planet seems to run in a single electrical stripe right up Africa. So from Durban, South Africa, up to Egypt, ending in Giza there, but then also extending to the next continents, all the way up to, Northern Europe, England, all the way up to the Celts, and then before that, the Vikings. And so you have this history of human ingenuity, human behavior, all that. And then as you start to dig down, you find out, oh my gosh, the anthropologists and archaeologists are showing us all of life leapt out of that one line.
That's right. That's where
all biodiversity birthed out of this meridian, the famous Rift Valley in Ethiopia. Yeah. Trees, plants, everything we've talked about, bacteria, fungi, all came springing out of this one thing.
Wow.
How does the planet have a generative source of life? Because it's an electrical being,
right,
and it can organize energy in a constructive syntropic way. Syntropy is the opposite of entropy. Entropy, of course, a measure of chaos. And so the measurement of order out of chaos is really a description of a witnessed universe. The second law of thermodynamics is really cool. It says any system left in isolation increases its entropy.
Right.
When we see a planet floating in black empty space.
Say that again so everyone can hear that. The second law of thermodynamics is?
Any system left in isolation increases its chaos.
Okay, keep going.
It's the most proven element of physics.
Yeah, come on.
And so
that's us too. Keep going.
Any human left in isolation increases its chaos.
That's right.
Any culture left in isolation increases its chaos.
And we're not talking about vipassanas and having your meditations. No. We're talking about as a species, as a way of life.
As an atom.
As an atom.
You isolate an atom, it increases its chaos.
Yes, sir.
So all the way down to the very fabric of nature, isolation increases chaos.
Right.
A planet that is bringing stardust into the beauty of life is syntropic. Mm-hmm. If we are syntropic, if we have a syntropic system on this planet that is increasing biodiversity, intelligence, and life every eon that goes by, we're not alone. Oh. So if we're not isolated, therefore syntropic, what does that mean about the greater connectivity of this planet? This planet was uniquely designed to be able to cycle carbon and water, and in so doing, capture energy at an extreme rate. Right. And so our planet, with its cobalt and its lithium and all of its deep ore systems, are not like hot points. We think of, there's a cobalt mine. That cobalt mine is a hot spot on a line that stripes all the way around the Earth. And so we have this electrical grid, basically an intelligent computer system that we're tearing apart through mining, through fracking, through all of these methodologies. We're disrupting the very communication network of a planet.
That's right.
And we're seeing instability of that planet now at the ecological level like never witnessed before. We are destroying the intelligence of the planet through our disruption of her circuitry.
That's right.
And so this whole fad, I was recently down in Mexico at a 50th birthday party of a tech giant out of Silicon Valley. And there's all these young Silicon Valley, billionaires, millionaires that are working together to try to solve for the planet now. And the solution that one of these guys was telling me over drinks by the pool is, I'm so excited because I've just developed a company. We're going into the jungles to discover the next lithium mines.
Oh, God. Wow.
So here's some of the most educated, most intelligent people within a country who are said the planet's dying. Yep. We should all drive electric cars to save the planet because carbon is the demon.
Absolutely.
In that construct, the obvious thing is go find lithium so we can build electric cars.
Yeah.
And so this poor kid is running around destroying rainforests to find the next lithium mine to disrupt the electrical circuitry of the planet so that we can have more electric cars so that we don't let carbon into the atmosphere, which is the currency for life. And so it's through the demonization of genetics in the form of viruses being the enemy, it's through the demonization of CO2, which is the very matrix of life on Earth, that we have come to accelerate our demise. And so in a bizarre way, our conservation messages of the last 3 decades of CO2 in the atmosphere is the enemy, and it's causing global warming, and it's causing...
This is beyond greenwashing. We're talking about accelerated, unknowing existential threats at a very, very fast rate. Who else is getting this?
CO2 at the beginning of is the generative force of life.
Yeah.
Every cell breathes CO2 for life. Yeah. I talked about mitochondria breaking the double carbon bonds to release energy. So we don't have light energy without CO2 turning into energy and through the greenness of the planet and then being broken apart. But it gets even deeper than that we can't breathe without CO2.
Right.
There's this old adage that these plants and their green leaves breathe in CO2 and humans breathe in oxygen.
Right.
And I exhale CO2 as a waste product, and this exhales oxygen as a waste product.
As a waste.
There is no such thing as waste.
That's right.
Ever. We now know, and we have known for over 100 years, that human cells have to breathe CO2 to function. Mm-hmm. And this is proven in every single cell biology lab in the world. Every single one of them that wants to grow a cell of any multi-species, or multicellular species, dog, cat, earthworm, human. If you're going to grow one of those human cells in a petri dish, you have to put it in an incubator at body temperature. And so we put these cells in petri dishes on these racks in an incubator that's sealed away from the atmosphere that we breathe, which is nitrogen, CO2, a little bit of oxygen, etc. The only gas that you have to pump into that sealed environment so that those cells can live is CO2.
Yeah.
If you pump oxygen in there, you kill the cells immediately.
Yeah,
Human cells do not breathe oxygen. Human cells breathe CO2. Oxygen's role is to be the foot on the accelerator of how fast can we use the carbon. But it's not the fuel, and it's definitely not the driver for energy.
The oxygen's controlling the rate at which the CO2 is being utilized by the cell?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you need just a little bit of oxygen in the atmosphere. About 20% of our atmosphere is oxygen.
Which makes sense why it's 20%.
Yeah, because if it's 80%, we'd be dead immediately.
That's right.
Why would we be dead? And this is what happens in an ICU. If you put somebody on 80% oxygen through a respirator or through a breathing device, you kill them in hours.
Their lungs can't catch up.
The
alveoli, right?
Well, no, what happens is you completely run them out of carbon.
You push the carbon out.
Foot on the accelerator pedal. So you bury that accelerator pedal on the floor with a bunch of oxygen, you're going to run every cell out of carbon instantly.
Interesting.
And now you just died of lack of energy.
Interesting.
We reached 88% mortality with this recent pandemic in ICUs because we were giving people 80% oxygen because they showed up blue. Not for a lack of oxygen, but for a lack of ability to move carbon and oxygen.
Wow.
We already told you that the people that were going to suffer from this virus were the ones that couldn't energetically meet the new demand of the opportunity.
Right.
And so they were failing to move oxygen and carbon. The carbon cycle was broken, so they showed up blue.
So you add more of you
so
give the throttle on
oxygen,
them?
Yeah, so they're already running on fumes. And then you slam the accelerator to the floor with a bunch of oxygen, and they're going to run out of, and they're going to be dead in a matter of hours.
Wow.
And we did that to millions of people globally.
Wow. Is this being spoken about?
As much as I can.
Okay.
But this is not new science.
Yeah.
This is old science, as old as cell biology.
Wow.
And so none of this is revolutionary information I'm giving out to the world. I'm just asking us to take a pause as scientists, whether we be biologists in the lab or planetary existentialists.
Yeah.
We need to reevaluate how this planet runs. And the answer is the same as a single human cell. It runs on carbon and water cycles. Not carbon and water, carbon and water cycles. It's the movement of currency of energy in this planet that allows life to occur. And so this whole idea of carbon offsets, abstract economy that with now more than $40 trillion pledged in carbon offsets, is a completely abstract market that has absolutely nothing to do with how biology works.
Yeah.
Terrifyingly, that those trillions of dollars are starting to fund giant projects to pump all the CO2 out of the atmosphere deep into the earth where it can't be breathed by a plant or a human cell. We will set this planet's recovery from this extinction event back millions of years if we start pumping all that CO2.
What happens when that CO2 gets pumped into the Earth's core?
It becomes unavailable to biology.
And we basically are starving out the cycle here. And plant life, human life, everyone suffers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are at this brink of human life, and we slam down the accelerator pedal saying we need more oxygen because we can't breathe, when in fact the failure of respiration isn't at the human level, it's at the soil level. So soils started dying under the plow. With the invention of the plow, Western civilization was born.
Right.
Says this in any textbook. So 900 AD or something, 1100 years ago, we see the invention of the plow. The plow is destroying soil systems globally, and then we put on top of that herbicides and pesticides to treat the weakening plant systems and with poor immune systems, etc. And now we're palliating sickness with more destruction of soil biology.
Right.
So the plow and herbicides, pesticides stacked together starting in the 1950s in a very vicious way, and we really denuded the earth. And so now 97% of arable, farmable soils on this planet are severely depleted or depleted of carbon.
Yeah, 97 is
97%.
The latest data.
97%. The 3% left is in two places. One, in the diverse beauty of the frozen tundra of Siberia, China, and Alaska on into northern Canada. So the tundra, which is frozen most of the year, we haven't been able to screw up because we can't farm the damn stuff. The other incredibly green place on the planet right now is the DR Congo, right in the middle of Africa.
Wow. Because
it's the most violent place on earth from a child military state, and so our chemical companies haven't been able to go in there and farm it yet. And so it's whenever we can't touch that is that 3%. And it's now understood that the 3% of indigenous cultures and peoples that are left are managing 80% of the biodiversity on the planet. The 3% left are managing 80% of the biodiversity of the planet.
Wow.
Anywhere Western civilization has gotten its stamp has destroyed biodiversity. Wow. And not just Western. China and its military operations, its military extractive economies and industries, same thing. So you got East-West sucking life out of Africa, which was the birth canal of everything.
Wow.
There's only one place that we need to recover, and that's the birth canal of this planet. And it will take the viruses that are in the bloodstream of this planet and create life so abundant and so beautiful we can't imagine it.
Let's talk about that real quick, because that seems to be the mission at hand and where your life's journey is taking you. So we're talking about Africa right now. Africa needs to be revitalized, needs to wake up. What are you doing about it?
So we've been on a 5-year kind of discovery of our own as a group of people trying to understand what is the generative quality of the planet. I've shared a lot of that with you today.
Yeah.
Out of that came this organization called Project Biome, with the understanding that there's actually 1.5 million nonprofits around the world working in the spaces of ecology or social justice. 1.5 million organizations, not individuals.
Yeah.
And during the creation of those 1.5 million organizations, we've seen the destruction of everything. And so why are they being ineffective? It's because they are isolated cells. And so we don't need another nonprofit, but we need the connective tissue. And so we set out 5 years ago to start to envision the connective tissue of 1.5 million organizations with tens of millions of people working towards the right mission. And so the answers are already discovered and are already got rugged individualists working themselves to complete exhaustion trying to do the right thing in their cell. We now need to create this greater intelligence of a group of people that have discovered the beauty and grace within nature that's going to recover and heal everything.
So you want to be the carbon tubes, essentially.
Fiber optic cables.
Fiber optic cables.
Let's get the fiber optics connecting.
How the hell do we do that?
So it's through an awareness, education, innovation, and policy pathway.
Yeah.
And so those are our four kind of avenues we think that really intertwine to create this new fabric. Awareness that we're doing right now is what I've been doing for years is so powerful. There's many organizations that have been saying that soil health equals human health.
Of course.
You go back to Steiner and you go back to Rodale. They were all saying that in the middle of the century last year. Nothing new. It suddenly caught fire when we started saying it in 2018 with Farmer's Footprint and our whole regen space because we were framing it in a new context of understanding. And so bringing awareness through something that goes beyond the discussion of a food system, to realize this is a human and planetary biologic system that needs reversion, it needs to be remembered. And by remembering, putting the members back together again, by remembering, we become the very beautiful thing that we've predicted ourselves to be capable of here. And so Project Biome has set foot, understanding that soil, water, and air systems need to become living systems again. We need to remove the fences, quite literally, and allow nature to start to recover her planet. for too long, we've been focused in Africa on single species conservation. Save the gorilla, save the rhino, save the elephant, whatever it is. Those were conscious cries for help,
of course,
of humans recognizing nature disappearing.
Right.
An important step forward. I liken this to like probiotics. It was important for us to realize in the 1970s, you know what, not all bacteria are bad.
Right.
A few good bacteria. Right. Fast forward 40 years, we find out every bacteria is good.
That's right.
And so it was our first little semblance towards
It's got to start somewhere.
But if you do 3 species of probiotics in a gut that's supposed to have tens of thousands of species, you end up doing as much damage as you did with antibiotics.
That's right. You're creating...
If you go and do single species conservation, now you're a probiotic for nature. These 3 species, rhinos, elephants, are important, and we're going to pour billions of dollars into this. But to do that, we have to set up fences all over Africa, owned by mostly international billionaires and the rest, who move in and buy up all these swaths of land, fence it off, and say, this little place is safe.
The disease sweeps in with it, yes.
It became an isolated event right then, and the chaos has to increase.
That's right.
And so we are, in our conservation efforts, doing the very thing that Jamestown did and everything else, is we are colonial in our concepts of conservation.
This is happening all along into the central network of Africa, from South Africa all the way up into Egypt.
It's way beyond that. It's everywhere now.
Yeah,
we've got gorilla saving places in South Asia.
Yeah.
We got people setting up fences all over the world in the name of conservation.
Right.
So step 1 for Project Biome is to realize that we need to rewild river systems and the carbon soil systems that are connected to those water veins.
How does that happen?
It's pretty easy. You just start taking down fences.
Okay.
And so if we created a kilometer of open space on either side of every one of the big 5 river systems of Africa and allowed the keystone species to return to those spaces, we would see an instant reversal of the desertification that's causing Africa to look like it does today.
Okay.
Most specifically, North Africa.
Right.
The Great Sahara Desert, the biggest Sahara in the world, is very rarely desert in the history of the planet. It cycles in and out of desert, and most of the time it's actually the largest grassland and savanna in the world has ever seen.
Right.
And that runs our carbon cycle, which then runs our water cycle.
Wow.
Just 7,000 years ago, the largest lake in the world was in the middle of the Sahara Desert, with a river coming out of that, flowing out to the ocean from a south-north thing, just like the Nile. Running parallel to the Nile up the middle of the Sahara was the largest river of the African continent. And that was the biggest trade system and the biggest ecological food system of the Roman Empire.
Right, it was the vein.
So as recent as 1,600 years ago, the Roman Empire colonized North Africa because it had so much food and deep soil systems and was creating more grains and olive trees and everything else to fuel the Roman Empire.
Totally. It was the jewel.
It was the jewel.
Yeah.
Alexandria, biggest, most wealthy city in the world. Why? Ethiopia, biggest,
Ethiopia.
You got all of your famous queens coming out of Ethiopia with all of the wealth of Ethiopia. This was, and now, in my day and age, I grew up with UNICEF telling me that all the Ethiopians were dying of starvation because they were in desert. And so
that right there, that contrast, 400 or 500 years ago, you had the most enigmatic time of plethora of beauty and commerce and food systems. And because of the greed or just the lack of gnosis of what's the intelligence of humanity and the Earth's connection, that separation has turned it now into the starvation capital of the world, right? Yeah. Where disease is running all over the place. That right there, that should shake somebody to the core and wait a second, what went wrong? Is it just a matter of systems or lack of diplomacy or some government not doing anything? No. It's the entire network of that thriving place has been stripped and rotten to the core.
It was taken away, basically.
Yeah.
And so we took all of that carbon material, food, et cetera, and carbon sources and moved it away from its soil system.
Wow.
So as soon as we developed trade lines away from source, we started to deplete our most rich soil systems of the world.
When did that start happening?
Yeah, so you're right there in Mesopotamia, so you're right there around Roman times where the trade lines really got set up big, right?
Yep.
The Silk Road to China and all of that is the last couple thousand years accelerating each century that goes by. Now you can't buy a can of beans in the United States doesn't have a 3,000-mile supply chain, right?
Right.
The U.S. is the quintessential way too long supply chain, sucking the nutrients out of the world and then shipping them to this one place. so that we can have bigger NFL players. It's like it is truly phenomenal that the longer your supply chain, the more you destroy the earth. And in fact, you see the exact same thing in cancer. When a cancer runs out of its local supply, it creates metastases to go out and start sucking energy back to the mother.
It's in survival mode.
It's survival mode.
Right, yeah,
It's reinforcing or palliating a dying system. And so cancer and its metastases is basically what we've become on the planet. But we could solve for that instantaneously, and we know that in the laboratory that you can take a cell from cancer to healed in seconds if you reconnect it. When a cancer cell reconnects to its environment, it does one of two things. Either immediately starts repairing such a rate that it's never cancer and thrives again, or it realizes it's too damaged to repair itself, and it creates a moment of apoptosis or programmed cell elimination and calls in a stem cell to birth something completely new in its place.
That's right. Oh, wow.
A cell with unfettered connection and access to information never dies. It only becomes more resilient and more beautiful and participates in something more beyond. So this is how we are as humans now, with a very simple of rewilding river systems, regenerative soil systems, and regenerative technologies that allow us to start to mimic nature's power. We will redesign the planet with her, not against her.
Right.
And so we will see a green North Africa in the next 20 to 30 years if we will do the right thing. It could be that fast because the keystone species are ready to help us. The elephants are amassing in Botswana and other parts of southern Africa to walk those ley lines again. The ley lines were the cobalt, the lithium, the gold. They will walk those ley lines, the electrical grids of the planet again, and they will show us how this planet generated in the first place. And so we need to have enough sense of natural law that every species is sovereign and here on purpose. And its purpose is to enrich the biodiversity and intelligence of the planet. It's a monkey, it's an elephant, it's just part of the neural network of life. This is one living organism called planet Earth. And so rewilding rivers, relatively simple concept. Start taking back the fences, allow those species to roam. With that, we get the carbon cycle restarted. When the carbon cycle starts moving, water follows it. So we will restore carbon and water cycles, which then, of course, burst the air cycle through that. So the only element that actually needs fixing, because everything's self-correcting in nature, the only element that actually needs fixing is the human within the system. Yeah. And so the fact that we have all these bumper stickers, save the planet, blah, 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 is hilarious. Like as if nature was waiting 4 billion years long for humans to come along to save the planet.
Right. We got to get out of its way.
We just have to realize we are here to participate with her in our right place, in our right relationship, which is what? To see her beauty. Yeah. And if we see her beauty, we will create such a respect field, such a field of gratitude, a vibration of love and gratitude that has never been seen on the planet because we were given the ability to see it. With seeing the beauty, we resonate with love. The resonance frequency that we call love, very dumbed down reductionist word, but it's a description of a frequency. Right. And that frequency occurs when our five senses witness beauty. And so if you don't feel love for yourself, it's not because you need to go think of why you need it. I think the real demise of human civilization was, I think, therefore I am.
Right.
No, you feel, therefore you are.
Right.
I feel, therefore I am. Because there is a sixth sense. And it is the vibration I feel within me when I give you a hug. Yeah. It's not my sense of smell, taste, anything else. It's the vibration within me, this innate knowingness of truth, of source. That sixth sense is how I calibrate. And if we start calibrating in that space, our five senses will see the beauty. And for that, we will resonate in love. And for all the love we feel, we will be in deep gratitude because the sense of love is such an ecstatic state. Right. And in that ecstasy, we can have nothing but gratitude.
There's no space for anything else.
And so nature will feel that and respond. And we now know that the plants, when I walk into a room in an ecstatic state of love and gratitude, the plants respond. And they're like, oh, hell yeah, more energy to that.
The secret life
more
of plants.
chlorophyll, more CO2 cycling. Let's get it going. Yeah. So when we shift into gratitude, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere will be sucked into life so fast that we will become the most vital biology the planet's ever seen. I want to be a
This is a worldwide phenomenon, epigenetics shift into a whole nother level. Wow. Wow, brother. I'm vibrating at the highest level. And I really appreciate from the deepest level of what true gratitude is, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm not trying to rationalize it. In fact, it's irrational because there's no words for it. It's a feeling. And you are obviously channeling something from the divine. You know, this isn't something that you picked up and interpreted reading a book. This took a level of mysticism to operate within you, at least through my observation, because that's what I'm feeling. This is the purpose-driven life, and I really, really appreciate everything that you're doing and sharing, and this is activating something within me, and I feel like I'm 8 or 9 years young again right now. I feel like I don't really believe in hope, but I'm feeling hope, and I want to take action. I want to run and I want to play. I want to be part of the solution and continue and never, find that there isn't a possibility that we can't find, because nature wants it and nature wants to communicate it. This is it. This is the cornerstone of it. Hallelujah.
It's beautiful. And anybody listening to this that's feeling that little spark of something that we might refer to as hope, what's happening in hope is that I believe that hope is actually a masculine energetics to it. The masculine energies of nature hold space so that the feminine flow can come through it.
Right.
Every atom, every molecule, doesn't matter gender or whatever, we have to say masculine, feminine. Those are just abstract genders that we've assigned to physical phenomena.
Sure.
And the physical phenomenon of hope creates space.
Oh.
And so can we collectively acknowledge the hope of a new humanity that could emerge from within us? Yeah. Not have to go discovered. It can certainly just emerge from our own cellular structure right now into a new state of being that is so much more vibrant, so much more connected, so much more sensitive to the beauty around us, that we will become that truly generative force that nature intended us to be. And in the space of hope, we can discover our curiosity. Curiosity is the symptom of the flow of the creation of the feminine within you. Who are you going to become? What are you going to create? What are you going to observe? This is what I get excited about, is if I spark 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people through my curiosity, what will they create? What neural network will we activate within humanity, let alone tap into on the face of the planet? To give you a visual on that, what just came powerfully to mind is I was recently in Africa with one of the last, really thoroughbred bushmen of the Kalahari, and was sitting in a backyard, and it was raining gently, and it was dark, and we were sitting outside because he wanted a fire, and the fire that he wanted was the cigarette that was burning in his fingers. And so I'm watching in the dark this little red ember on the end of this man's fingers brightening and dimming as he breathes through this cigarette. And he's telling me some of the most extraordinary beauties of the planet and his interpretation of nature itself. And we're talking about ancient soils and all kinds of things that are he just has access to all of this information. And I finally said, you know what I'm really bummed about is I just haven't seen too many elephants this trip. I really wanted to see more elephants because it's a big part of my blah, blah, blah. And he's listening, and I'm seeing that little red fire on the end of his fingers flaring and flaring. He's listening, and he just sits there for a while. And he was very slow to answer me with anything I said. He just let it sit there in the air.
Sure.
And he says to me, I can show you right now how to call elephants to you from 10,000 kilometers away. I was like, deal. And so I see that red ember set down next to him, and he gets off his chair, I think we're sitting on these little stump things, and he gets down on his hands and knees, and he says, do this. Get down on my hands and knees with this guy. He says, this is how you call elephants. Open up your heart. Shine love down into the planet. Did you do that? Yeah. The elephants for 10,000 kilometers around us just felt that through the pads of their feet, designed to take up the frequency of love.
The network.
They'll come to you now. Curious what sparked a moment of love where we sit now. That's, my friends, what we are capable of doing, is we are capable of calling life to us in the same vibration that we spoke of at the symphony at the beginning. Yeah. You are part of a symphony that is so beyond human. It is life itself, which is an expression, a finite expression of infinite energy within the universe. And you are called to be witness to the beauty that will leap forward from that network of information, that network of life itself. And you get to be a part of that at the heart level, at the feeling level, at that gut vibration level of your intuition, which will drive your hope, which will make space for your curiosity, which will put you into your divine state of creativity so that you will make something when you see the elephant.
I love you, brother.
Glad to be here with you, brother.
Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for being here. What a ride. What a journey. Let's keep it going.
Thank you.